Okay. Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this session, Affordable Housing in Your Neighborhood, Options and Inspiration. So this panel presentation is going to include work by the Housing Opportunities for All vertically integrated project at Boise State University, part of the School of Public Service. My name is Krista Paulson. I'm a faculty member primarily in urban studies in the School of Public Service, and I'm here with Dr. Vanessa Fry, who is the interim director of the Idaho Policy Institute. Dr. Fry and I have been working this year with a wonderful team of students who are part of this vertically integrated project, or VIP. And I want to tell you just a little bit about what that is before we get going here. Last year, Dr. Fry and I had some conversations about the housing crisis that the Treasure Valley is experiencing, primarily as a result of this incredibly tight housing market that we have right now. And dimensions of that crisis include things like eviction and homelessness, also increasing rental prices, barriers to rental access, and some proposed redevelopment kinds of projects that might threaten existing affordable housing inventory. So as a result, we created this vertically integrated project, which is a team of undergraduate and graduate student researchers to really operate as a rapid response team who would be well trained and able to devote their research energies to projects as they emerge in the Treasure Valley. And so we just started that project this semester. Now, a vertically integrated project is designed to help students develop real-world research experience working under the supervision of faculty. So they develop research skills as well as skills in communication and leadership, and we hope that you'll see those in the students' work today. And this is the first semester of our project, so these students have really gone from having a nascent interest in housing issues to becoming quite well versed, as you'll see in their work. So what they're going to present to you today is a primer on affordable housing in the US and Boise. They'll introduce key concepts in affordable housing, discuss some US programs, and provide some insights from international contexts. Then finally, they'll give some description of what's available here in Boise. At the end of that presentation, we'll have time for questions and conversation with the audience members. So the students who are involved in this project include Chloe Bauer, Emily Berg, Nathaniel Campbell, Julia Garofalo, Marissa Keith, Katie McAnally, and Callie West. And so we'll go ahead and begin their presentation now. There's no audio on this end. So hold on, bear with us for just a moment here while we get that sorted.
Okay, I will make another attempt to see if this will work.
Hello. Kelly, can you use the chat?
So is that not working?
I don't see the shared screen now. Do you want me to try it from my end?
Well, could you hear it or no?
No.
Okay, let me try. It might be that or do you have it? Do you want to do it?
I can try.
Okay. I think you have to unmute the video part of it is the problem.
McAnally. Hello everyone, my name is Katie McAnally, and I'm going to start out our presentation by giving you some basic terms that you might come across when you're studying affordable housing. First of all, what exactly is affordable housing? Affordable housing is housing that is set aside to accommodate low-income individuals with the goal of the cost not exceeding 30% of the individual or family's income. Low income is defined by the Department of Housing and Urban Development as 80% or less of the median family income. Now, the median family income is based on a family of 4, but this can be adjusted if the family is larger. The median family income in the Boise metro area is $74,800, and that makes the low income number $59,840. These numbers do represent all of the Treasure Valley, even though it says Boise metro area. So we were talking about Meridian, Nampa, Caldwell, and so on. Another term that you might come across when you're studying affordable housing is fair market rent. This is a number that's also estimated by the Department of Housing and Urban Development, and it reflects the fair price for a rental in any given area of the United States. You can look these two terms up at huduser.gov. There's 2 really useful lookup tools, and I cannot stress enough that there's so much great information at huduser.gov. Now I'm going to turn this over to Marissa Keith, who is going to give us some more definitions of affordable housing.
Hi, I'm Marissa. Housing insecurity is not having stable housing. This may include homelessness, but is also people sleeping on couches, not knowing if one can make enough money to pay rent, inadequate or unreliable lease agreements that may not be based on legal paperwork, and poor housing quality that may not pass inspections. Market rate housing is an apartment without rent restrictions or selling a home for what a buyer will pay for it, typically to the highest bidder. These are just a few of the terms you might run across. If you find other terms that are unfamiliar, please ask about them at the end of the presentation.
Hello, my name is Julia, and I'm going to discuss some of the main details around affordable housing in the United States, starting with the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development. Their mission is to help create a decent home and suitable living environment for all Americans, and some of the major programs that are administered by the United States Department of Housing and Urban Development include rental assistance, homeless assistance, public and subsidized housing for low-income individuals, mortgage and loan insurance, as well as fair housing enforcement. In order for individuals to receive assistance, they would submit an application through their local public housing authority or PHAs. I've actually included the public housing agency for Ada County's contact information on the bottom right corner of the screen if anyone were interested in finding out more. Unfortunately, there's currently a long wait list due to the demand of housing assistance, but there are many programs involved around what the public housing agency deals with, which I'm going to talk about. So starting with the Housing Choice Voucher Program, it's a federal program that aids in assisting very low income individuals, and it actually gives them a choice of where they want to live. And more information about the Housing Choice Voucher Program can be found on hud.gov. And I've also want to discuss another program around housing, which is VA supportive housing. This program is also in the form of vouchers. And in addition to housing, it also provides healthcare, mental health, and substance abuse counseling. And it's for veterans who are experiencing homelessness. Information on this program can be found by visiting the va.gov. I also discovered something called the Housing First model, which is established to assist people who are experiencing chronic homelessness. This provides housing stability without a prerequisite, like some of the other programs above. What I mean by this is sobriety, poor rental history, evictions, criminal records, they're all disregarded in the Housing First approach, and it's basically for immediate shelter for those in need. There's also supportive services like harm reduction techniques. They're typically provided in this model, however, they're not required for individuals who are a part of this program. Its end goal is basically to help people achieve long-term housing stability in a permanent housing situation. More information about this program can be found on a website called usich.gov. Hopefully this information was helpful in understanding the options that individuals have that are experiencing hardships in the US. I am now going to pass the presentation along to my friend Callie, who's going to discuss further. Thank you so much.
All right. So someone who can be supported by affordable housing is anyone who is a part of a family, a senior citizen, or a person with a disability who also qualifies with a low income. I would like to note, and I'll go more into this next, but each area location that an American lives is impacted based on the median income. So based on what their income is will impact how their eligibility and priority on being able to be eligible for housing aid. Someone might hinder from receiving aid on housing if they have committed any criminal activity within federal housing. So this could be fraud or any other activities that may have happened. An individual may be put on the top of this housing priority list. For aid would be somebody who lost their home due to a fire, a natural disaster, an urban development, or an area that is no longer considered healthy or safe by the local board of health. Housing emergency is also considered a priority. So anyone who's facing domestic violence or has a medical emergency. And then also families are also typically put on top of priority of this list. And especially if they have younger children who are infants or toddlers, they are also put towards the priority of the list as they are younger children who need to be in a safe area. And I just would like to add that all of this is changed based on location and area, but this is information supported in Boise, Idaho. Now I'd like to introduce Emily and Chloe, and they're going to talk about international affordable housing.
Hi, my name is Chloe Bauer, and today we will be talking about international affordable housing. You might be wondering why we are bringing in international examples when we are here in the United States. We as a class believe that it is important to bring up these examples because there is no one-size-fits-all for affordable housing. For example, this map of Australia shows the different regions and how the different outcomes affordable housing have been. Experts around the world have studied and attempted strategies that have succeeded, but also have failed. We wanted to show some of what has worked and what hasn't worked in countries similar to the US around the world. First, I'll be talking about Australia. A study done by the Australian Housing and Urban Research Institute found that there are several problems with Australians' affordable housing. There are weak policies set in place Too little public funding, a lack of government leadership, and not enough affordable housing property. One of the study's main focuses was on policy. They studied different state-level policies, affordable housing planning outcomes, and financial parameters of the project to find out what exactly the problems were. They concluded that there are certain policy implications, basically key ingredients, to policies that make them more likely to succeed. The first policy implication that they included was resilience of the program or strategy. They explained that for a policy to be successful, it needs long-term political support. The next one they brought up was leadership. They noted that this is the most important implication. Policies need support from influential leaders to last and be successful. They also brought up one of the most challenging obstacles, federal funding. The study also brought up a policy that for a policy to get support from multiple agencies, it is key that a policy has involvement and leadership from other central agencies. Policies also need to have collaborations and consultations that happen between both public and private sectors. The last policy implication they found was the nature of the study. The study found, and I quote, "The quality of housing outcomes for any strategy are closely aligned with the quality of the actions contained within the strategy." While there is no one-size-fits-all for affordable housing, these policy implications could help countries similar to Australia create more successful policies for affordable housing.
Hi, I'm Emily Berg, an MPA student, and today I'm going to be talking to you about affordable housing in the United Kingdom. So in the 80s and 90s, the United Kingdom faced a pretty bad recession and resulting housing crisis, and they enacted several policies that endure today for affordable housing. It's really important the way countries conceptualize affordable housing, and in the United Kingdom, since this time, the general consensus is that it's an entitlement for everyone. That has enabled them to devote a lot more resources to providing housing for citizens, and currently in the United Kingdom, 16% of their housing stock is considered affordable, while only 2% in America. The UK has relied on 4 main policy tools that emphasize community, private sector, and other partnerships, and they allow for a range of affordable options for a lot of different folks. So the first is the right to buy, and that offers tenants the opportunities to purchase their unit or some portion of the equity, often heavily subsidized. And the second, they do large-scale voluntary transfer programs. So the National Housing Authority has acquired properties by taking over 100% of the debt with private lenders. The authority then takes over maintenance of the property and significantly improves both the units and the surrounding infrastructure, which has led to a lot of stability in the market and attraction for lenders to make these loans. The third happens with private and public funding, and that's creating new affordable housing units. So the HA frees up the rent controls for a certain portion of the housing units in order to fund the project, and then offers housing benefits to the low-income folks who come in. So the HA also heavily influences land planning, and it requires developers of all housing types to include a certain portion of their new builds for low-income tenants. And unfortunately, as these programs have progressed over time, the attraction for these public-private partnerships has declined for various reasons. And the UK still has about 8.4 million facing housing insecurity, even with a provision of 47,000 new housing units each year. So scholars agree that relying on these types of private-public relationships alone is a volatile way to provide affordable housing in the long run. And next, I'll introduce Nathaniel Campbell. He will be speaking about affordable housing options here in Boise.
Hey everyone, my name is Nathaniel, and I will be talking about affordable housing options in Ada County in Boise. First and foremost, affordable housing in Boise is managed and overseen by the Boise City Ada County Housing Authorities. Currently, they house more than 2,600 individuals and families in the city and county, while also seeking out new opportunities for affordable housing from landlords and developers. There are 9 affordable housing developments across the city utilized for 3 different purposes. Subsidized housing is generally used in conjunction with housing choice vouchers, where an eligible resident pays about 30 to 40% of their household income towards rent. Many of these residents are elderly or persons with disabilities. Supportive housing provides homeless or at-risk individuals with stable arrangements and services such as case management, counseling, and medical care. Emergency shelters are separate from supportive housing in this instance. The last is market rate housing, which consists of 184 units for the general public at the going rate for that specific area, which varies from area to area. Supportive housing is a bit different than other types, as it aims to provide the stability necessary for individuals or families to obtain their own housing. Supportive housing, in a sense, acts as a kind of intermediary in that process. Many people know supportive housing serves the homeless and disabled, but it also provides housing to a number of other vulnerable demographics, including developments for homeless veterans, those escaping domestic violence, and individuals with HIV/AIDS. To provide a visualization of the distribution of affordable housing in the Boise area, here is a map with 9 developments managed by the Boise City Ada County Housing Authorities, and I'll talk about a few here in detail. Hobbler Place stands out from the rest both geographically and with its design as what is essentially a small neighborhood, 21 single-family homes offered at an unsubsidized market rate here in Northwest Boise. Next is New Path Community Housing, which opened in fall 2018 and offers supportive housing to people in Boise and Ada County, located in the west end on the border of downtown. Market rate housing can also be subsidized with a housing choice voucher, but this depends on a specific individual's circumstances. The remaining developments on this map are market rate, with the exception of Valor Point, a brand new development that offers healthcare, mental health counseling, and substance abuse treatment to the community's vulnerable veterans that opened in August of this year. Thanks for your time.
So thanks very much to our students for the presentation. We now have time to address questions that you can pose to either the students, to Dr. Fry, or myself. You can do so using the chat or using the app.
And I'm monitoring both of them. Okay. So we've had some great information shared by Eric Kingston, who's with Idaho Housing and Finance. Someone had asked earlier, actually, before the presentation started about, let's see, the question was, is affordable housing the same as low income housing? And so in the chat, Eric provided a really good and concise description regarding that. Affordable housing is really about what any individual can afford, which we consider to be 30% or less of their income to be spent on housing. And then low-income housing is more qualified by the amount of income an individual makes. And so for those of you that are on the app, he provided with a number of links to learn more about those definitions. And I can put them into the Zoom chat too, so people have them.
So one of the questions here is, did I see this correctly, that there is 0 affordable housing in Southeast Boise? So I think one of the things that this question brings up is that there are many types of housing within communities that might be affordable. So for instance, some housing is what we might call naturally occurring affordable housing, and those would be rentals that are available within a reasonable share of the median income within a region. Now, those may be available on the private market. Of course, in a market like Boise is experiencing right now, many of the rentals that are available are outside of the typical earnings of families and households that we find here. The map that you saw showed the housing that is administered by the Boise City Ada County Housing Authority. So those are the housing authorities' affordable housing options. Dr. Fry, is there anything you'd like to add to that?
No, I'm just looking at what Michael Shepard shared in the chat here on Zoom. First, he shared about some units that are run and owned by NeighborWorks Boise, which is a nonprofit that provides affordable housing opportunities in the city. And then he also provided some information in regards to the question that it looks like Danielle, if I'm pronouncing that right, just asked regarding affordable housing on Apple Street off of Boise Avenue. And I think what Nathaniel was providing as part of his talk was specific to affordable housing units owned by the city of Boise. And of course, NeighborWorks Boise, for instance, as a nonprofit, is not owned or run by the city. And so there's additional affordable housing, whether it's income restricted or naturally occurring affordable housing across the city. Of course, we're seeing less and less of that market rate or naturally occurring affordable housing as costs of housing go up in and around Boise and in the greater Treasure Valley area. And what Michael shared was that NeighborWorks Boise rents are limited to those at least 60% area median income is what he shared in the chat. And so I believe the complex off of Apple Street is a NeighborWorks Boise complex. Does anyone else have any questions regarding either what the team presented here this afternoon or any other opportunities or issues with housing in the Boise area? Or I think it's also a platform to share ideas or other things that you've seen.
So one question posed here is about the relationship between affordable housing and homelessness. I'm not sure if that has to do with questions about chronic homelessness and affordable housing, but I do think there's some questions that emerge around when we think about homeless populations who are chronically homeless. How much does that have to do with changes in the housing market? So I think we could speak to that just a little bit. Vanessa, did you want to speak to
Sure,
that?
definitely. So when I tend to think about housing from a research perspective, I tend to think of it along a spectrum. So housing isn't just one. It's not just one cost or for one type of need. It's really people that are experiencing complete security in their housing all the way through to where people are experiencing homelessness, or those people that are experiencing chronic homelessness, who are people who have been homeless for a year or more and also have some sort of disabling condition. And that the type of housing that people need is really dependent on the person or the family. And so someone experiencing chronic homelessness, for instance, might need more of a supportive housing structure that one of the students talked about in a housing first scenario, where someone gets into housing first before they are required to meet any sort of other commitments, stop using alcohol, for instance. But we might also have a family of four that doesn't have a disabling condition and might be experiencing a housing insecurity. So maybe they've been evicted. Well, how can we make sure to either keep them housed in the unit they're in now or quickly move them into a new unit where they do have housing stability? So it's really along a spectrum. So in order to prevent anyone from experiencing homelessness, we need to make sure first and foremost to keep people that are housed, which is really important, and to keep them housed in the most affordable way possible for that individual or family.
So there's a great question here in the chat that says, can you talk about barriers to building affordable housing, whether those are financial or social? And then there's an ellipsis. So I assume that's addressing that there might be multiple kinds of barriers.
So do you want me to take that on, or do you want to
start? There's plenty to say there. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So as the person that fielded or asked the question kind of alluded to, there's multiple barriers that are in place perceived or otherwise, to getting more affordable housing in the city of Boise, or really any community. One of the ones that we face a lot is what we might call people that are saying, you know, not in my backyard. They might not be welcome to opportunities for affordable housing. And what I found in my research, that's mostly because they're unsure what that actually means. What are those housing units going to look like? Is that going to affect my quality of life or the value of my home? Is it going to affect my safety in any way, shape, or form? So what I found in my research is the more education and the more conversations we can have about what affordable housing is and what it is not, that helps decrease that NIMBYism and turn it into YIMBYism, yes, in my backyard. So that's something that we're really talking a lot about in our VIP this semester, is really defining what it is and what it is not. There are also, of course, barriers with right now housing stock. So we have a very low vacancy rate, which means the number of units, rental or ownership, that are vacant at any one given time. And so that means that we simply just don't have enough housing for the demand here, which of course, given simple economics, means that with less supply, more demand, costs are going to go up. But part of the challenge is we just can't build new units quick enough, right? To make sure that supply and demand issue isn't as it is right now. And that, you know, that has to do with also like financial, the cost of labor has gotten to be much more expensive. So the cost to even build more units has become more expensive, and the cost of not just labor, but the cost of wood and other supplies, concrete. Just trying to think of other things that she has here in this question. Do you want to, and zoning, right? So there's, and the city is doing an amazing job right now looking at updating their zoning code. And one of the items that the mayor and her team are really interested in is making sure that affordable housing is a tenant that is taken into consideration as the zoning code is rewritten and addressed. And so in what ways can the city facilitate a more carrot approach to encouraging affordable housing? One of the things that's been done in the past is to increase the opportunity for accessory dwelling units in certain neighborhoods across the city. And so those are units that are on an existing property that might be sometimes considered a mother-in-law. So sometimes people think of it as like kind of the apartment in the backyard, which tend to be a little bit more affordable, or can be more affordable. There are opportunities to increase density. So going from a particular piece of land that's maybe zoned for a certain number of units and increasing the number of units that are allowed on that property. And so that helps us bring down the cost that it might be for units. Dr. Paulson, do you have any other thoughts you want to add to this?
Well, one thing that I would add to this is also the value in the current housing stock, right? And so we think a lot about building affordable housing. I think we need to balance that with a consideration of how to retain affordable housing, right? So we have many kinds of projects that may be purchased and undergo some investment and then be marketed to a different type of rental market. So for instance, things that will be improved, whether sort of cosmetically and superficially or really dramatically improved, and then be have the rents increased and no longer be so accessible or so affordable to the types of folks who had been living there before. And as we look around nationally, I think that's something really important to consider. Boise is not immune from the national trend that we see of what we might call the financialization of housing, where you have investors really looking to housing as a way to create dividends for themselves or for fellow investors. And so since housing is something that is a necessity, we see that that is really being looked to as an opportunity. And so that makes a lot of the existing affordable housing stock somewhat vulnerable to processes of redevelopment. And it really essentially becomes removed from the affordable market.
There's another question in the app, and let me just go back to it real quick. It's regarding a specific housing project, Moxie Ridge. It says it's off of Amity. And the person asking the question was wondering if it's really affordable housing or not. It sounds like that a certain maybe set of the community was told that it would be affordable housing, but that the units themselves are selling for well north of 400,000. Is that still considered affordable? So I personally don't know about that development. So it'd be hard for me to speak to if that's indeed the case, if that's what the units are going for, or if there's any deed restricted housing in that development. So a deed restricted housing would be housing that, so there could be a development in which there are market rate houses that are going for, 400,000 or north of that. And but within that development, there could also be some deed restricted housing units that maybe are a little bit more affordable or quite a bit more affordable. But I don't know, Dr. Paulson, if you know anything about that particular development or if you can speak to that at all.
I don't know about that particular development, but something to keep in mind, and this is an area that really requires additional research, but one of the arguments, that's kind of the logic behind the YIMBY argument and the build more arguments to just really increase the supply of housing in regions that are undergoing housing crises. The argument is that building housing at every level eventually increases the stock of affordable housing because people with more resources will be buying the units that are at the top end, which frees up the bottom end to those who don't have a lot of other options. And I think that that's something that's really ripe for some empirical research to see if indeed that is the case. But that's a new kind of hypothesis regarding the operation of housing markets.
There's another piece of information that Eric Kingston from Idaho Housing and Finance put in the chat for the app, and it was regarding just the concept, and this is what Dr. Paulson was just speaking to some extent, is there's many ways to think about supply and demand in the housing market, and it's not as straightforward as simple supply and demand, right? So some people say, well, if we just build more housing in Boise, we're going to be fine, right? We just need to, keep up. Well, that might not necessarily be the case. So sometimes we need to consider, what type of supply are we building for what type of tenant or homeowner, and to make sure that perhaps in some cases there are incentives for whether it's developers or incentives or subsidies for the individuals going into a property to make sure that's affordable. So there's a lot more that goes into it. I think one interesting question that we're talking about with this class this semester is whether or not housing can be considered a public good. Is it something that we believe as a community or as a country that everyone needs to have access to in regards to safe, affordable housing? And we can use that terminology that Eric was mentioning earlier in his chat about housing that's someone spending 30% or less of their household income on. And so it's interesting to think about that, because if we do believe it's a public good, then we might act certain ways in regards to policy or in the private market. So that's not something that our country has necessarily gone in that direction of, but it's interesting to think of it as in that regard.